am happy to have everybody here this morning. Um, Welcome to the second in our series, four-part series of webinars on how to plan and build an accessory dwelling unit. I'm Janae Huber. I'm the co-founder of Olympians for People-Oriented Places, also more easily called OPOP. OPOP is a group of volunteers whose vision is a compact and diverse Olympia designed around people-oriented places. OPOP volunteer Virginia Sorrells had the idea for this series of workshops and organized the series with help from Nick Vroman, myself, and Phil Vandevanter. And I want to say too, we actually planned this event. Maybe you planned the series of events as a half-day workshop last March. So as the year of COVID comes full circle, here we are making another stab at it online. So this event has been generously sponsored by the South Sound section of the Washington chapter of the American Planning Association. These folks are our local planners, and they're doing important and very consequential work in our cities, county, and region. In addition to presenting in today's session, local bank OliFed also stepped in to support this series. We are so grateful for their collaboration, which helps make this event series free to the public and available to a wider audience. OPOP is interested in ADUs because they have the potential to provide more diverse housing in our community, and in particular in areas that are already developed and served by our shared infrastructure. In other words, we like infill housing. Today, we're going to be covering financing. Our upcoming panel sessions are all listed on OPOP's website, which is opopnow.org. They're going to cover planning and design and construction. We've got some really fantastic panelists, all of whom are volunteering their time, including some architects and builders at the upcoming panels. And finally, I've got a couple items of business before I introduce today's speakers. We're going to ask that you please use the Q&A tool on your toolbar for questions. Our panelists are going to present, but then we'll go through as many of the questions as we're able to, again, keeping to the 11 a.m. finish time after the presentations are done, but you're welcome if something comes up for you during a presentation to go ahead and throw it into the Q&A ahead of time. There'll also be a little time after the presentations for you to process what you've heard and put questions in the Q&A. So our workshop today has nearly 100 attendees. And to ensure the maximum benefit, we're going to request that you keep your questions as general as possible. So as much as we'd love to learn about your specific project, please save those questions for your lender. Maybe don't want to hear about your lot size or how much equity you have in your house, or sort of the what ifs that might be specific to your project. But keep your questions general and think about how they can benefit all of the folks who are attending today. We'd also love to know how you heard about this event. It's helpful for us to know the most effective ways to get the word out. And so I'm going to stop for a second blabbing at you here and do a quick poll. Just give me a second to get my screen back to what I want it to be so that I can launch the poll. Alas, Zoom. Oh, yay. Thank you to whoever did that. Phil, I'm guessing. So yeah, go ahead and complete the poll. And then again, that will help us with our promotion. Of course, we're finding that things like social media become less effective than they used to be, as Facebook would like more advertising dollars. So anyway, so knowing how you heard about it is super helpful to us. All right, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Oh, looks like there's still a couple people filling out. Okay, there we go. Thank you. All right, and you can see still social media, people are hearing about this. So thank you again for participating. That really does help us understand more how we can reach people when we're hosting events. So, and finally, this session and all the relevant resource materials are posted on the OPOP website within a week of the event. In fact, actually, if you missed our first workshop on rules and regulations, where we had city staff from Lacey and Olympia, you can actually find that on the OPOP website. The recording is already there and ready for folks to take a look. So take a look there if you're interested in kind of going back and learning more about rules and regulations. They actually also cover a tiny bit of Tumwater regulations as well, just in case you're a Tumwater resident who's interested in this. I'd now like to welcome our three esteemed panelists. Today, you're going to hear from Luke Bowerman. Luke is an Olympia born and raised parent, a software engineer, a landlord, and an occasional developer. So it's going to be really wonderful to hear from him because he has if you're planning on building an ADU in your backyard, you probably also are only an occasional developer. So getting to learn what he's learned by doing this non-professionally, I think is going to be really helpful. We're also going to hear from Barb Whitlow. I first met Barb through her work with the Eco Building Guild. She's been a part of the team at OliFed for more than 37 years. She works with a residential lending group to support partnerships and outreach. And in addition, she serves on multiple boards and committees, and she's also an advocate for affordable housing in Thurston County. And finally, we'll get to hear from Lindsay Bomba. Lindsay is a district manager and loan officer overseeing 4 of the 8 OliFed branch locations. Lindsay volunteers her time as the board president of the Child Care Action Council. She was born and raised in Thurston County. So welcome to these wonderful panelists. It's great to have you, and I'm going to turn it over to Luke to start with. Let me stop my screen share.
Hi there, everybody. See how quickly I can switch my screen share around here. Hopefully you can see a picture of me, just to prove I'm doing things right. So I'm going to kind of lay the groundwork for what financing ADUs looks like, what sort of the broad areas of concern and opportunity are, and then the folks from OliFed will talk more about specifically about some sub portions of that world. So just starting out, one of the things we want to talk about, or I wanted to ground level set, is that I'm not going to talk much about dealing with investment property, although that's an area that I have worked. So the primary sort of discussion we're going to have today is around funding ADUs on like your primary residence. So where you live today and adding it in the backyard, or updating a garage or basement to an ADU. So just keep that in mind about some of the financing opportunities that are different versus for investment. To be completely clear, investment tends to be harder, especially with ADUs today. Just it's a different world as far as what's available. So types of financing breaks into 2 sort of big buckets. One is bank financing, so a mortgage, first or second, construction loans, personal lines of credit, and the folks Barbara and from OliFed are going to talk more about these programs. So I'm going to kind of skip that and what the opportunities there are. But the other part of that, switch slides here, are all the other kind of types of financing that exist out there. So personal savings, the money you have sitting in the bank today, or in gold bars in your closet, or wherever you store your savings. Personal loans from friends and family. So this is, a common tool, and they can be secured or unsecured depending on what works for you and the person, whomever you're borrowing from. Credit cards, and I'll talk about this more specifically later down. But if you have a small project, sometimes a sane way to kind of bridge financing can be just to use a high load credit card. You can take a loan from your 401k. Definitely seen folks do this. Again, hopefully as a bridge, so you can put it back later, but it's an option. Sweat equity is a super important thing to think about, like what parts of the construction could you do yourself to save money on construction. It also can be, sweat equity only goes so far, both from your skill set, your time, and of course, materials. No amount of sweat replaces how much lumber costs, for instance. Last but not least, there are another class of loans called hard money loans. These are generally loans to individuals or non-bank institutions. I would say approach those with caution. They're not regulated like bank loans are. They can have creative terms, and they tend to have higher interest rates, but they are a piece of the sort of world out there. So a really big key for all of this with any loans is thinking about equity. And so one thing when I was talking to a few folks about this, I realized some folks didn't really understand the term equity and how it works. But you have your appraisal value minus your debt. So whatever you owe on it, probably the mortgage, equals your equity. So a real example of that might be your house is worth $200,000 in appraisal. You have 100 on it. So you have $80,000 in equity. One caveat, of course, here is like in a conventional mortgage, generally you wouldn't go to, or I should say, in some mortgages, you can't go to 100%. So you might only realize some portion of that equity as being lendable, but there are a variety of loan programs out there. So that's the general concept of equity. So one of the things I refer to in that equity sort of calculation is appraisal value. So there are some challenges specifically around appraisal in general and appraisal with ADUs that are worth keeping in mind. Market value and appraisal value are not the same. So if you go to Zillow and it says that your house is worth $700,000 today or some crazy number, that doesn't mean that their appraiser is going to actually tell you that it's worth that much and tell the bank, but most importantly, that it's worth that much. The county valuation, so the amount of the value that the county says and therefore assesses your taxes on, is often closer. So, the hard thing is appraisals are funny. They don't always land exactly. I've often said typically that they're somewhere in between those two numbers. Often appraisal is fairly, I should say, the county valuation is a fairly safe number in most situations. There are some strange exceptions, like if you have a really large lot, a 2-acre lot, the county might assess it for more than an appraiser will appraise it for because they can't see the value in the land sometimes. So a little bit of things to be aware of there. Just if you're playing it really close, if you're using every dollar of your predicted appraisal, you may want to be careful with that. The other piece is that today ADUs are really tricky to appraise. So appraisals are based on comparable sales within a certain period of time, and it depends on the loan and the bank and a bunch of factors, but usually it's within 6 to 24 months of the sales. And so they need to try and find a similar home, so maybe a 3-bedroom, 2-bath of a certain size, or in a certain neighborhood, along with a similar ADU, all that packaged together to call it a comp. That's going to be really hard to find when there's very few ADUs in an area. And Olympia doesn't have a ton of ADUs today. So it can be hard to find comps. Without a direct comparison, an appraiser will basically find something they think is comprehensive but missing a piece. So let's say most likely missing the ADU, and then they're going to kind of do a calculation to do it. Unfortunately, those calculations tend to be low on ADUs today because their best way to do it is just to say, their best way to compare probably is to say, well, the ADU is 500 square feet, so I will just take, $100 times 500, and that's the value. So, which is often less than you might think it's worth. So it's a little interesting. That said, things are changing. We're seeing more ADUs. Comps will improve over time as we see more of these. So the other side is if you're thinking about making this a rental, which obviously not all people build ADUs as rentals, they might build them as a home office or space for family to visit or to age in place. But in general, if you're thinking about them as a rental, one of the important things is to think about, like, how much debt can I afford to take on and then pay with the rent I might get from it. So these prices are just based on like a highly unscientific survey of active listings in the market, as well as a small group of local landlords, and just sort of like spitballing what these general units of these size might rent for. The prices do generally reflect utility exclusive pricing, so it doesn't include utilities. So they often would go up a little bit if you were, for instance, if they were on your water bill or they were on your electric bill. And so, they might be $100 higher if they're inclusive. And that's a sort of hand-wavy price. Really generally, detached ADUs rent a little bit on the higher end of the numbers. Basement units might rent slightly lower. Again, there's not a ton of variance. Proximity to the urban core, which is pretty much downtown here, and proximity to transit tend to make the rents go up a little bit. And then one thing to know is that size has really little impact. So the difference between 500 and 600 square feet is near zero. The really small might be a little bit less, really large might be a little bit more, but generally bedrooms are key. How many folks are going to live there is the likelihood. Pet-friendly units rent more easily, and in the local market, people charge fees or deposits sometimes. In my experience as a landlord, we don't charge much for pets. We charge a little extra deposit that goes back, but we do find that it gets us a larger swath of possible renters out there. So with all of this in mind, I wanted to take a look at sort of a good tool to kind of understand how all these numbers fit together. And the County of San Mateo has a project called the Second Unit Resources Center, and they built this really nice calculator, which if you want to play with it yourself, is actually linked on the ADU, on the OPOP ADU website, or resources page right down here as ADU calculator. If you visit the site, what you'll find here is that you pick a city. For ease of use, I'm using Millbrae just because I did some cross calculations on it. And you can choose the kind of project you're doing. So maybe conversion of part of a house or new construction, which would be a probably detached ADU. And you can choose the size, so maybe 1 bedroom and 1 bathroom. And they're just going to guess the square footage. 600 is probably fair. Again, the exact square footage isn't going to have a ton of impact on construction costs. And what you'll see is they'll actually kind of kick out a construction cost of 250,000. Obviously, this is for Millbrae, which is it's in the Bay Area. So it'd be a bit higher. Honestly, when I've looked at construction costs, these aren't far off, honestly. So that's a little horrifying, but the 250,000 isn't crazy today. The one thing that is quite a bit higher is the rent rate. So 1 bedroom, based on our numbers, we're closer to like 1,400. There, 1,700. But it's really useful to kind of get a sense. The thing I think is really valuable about this tool is you can compare different kinds of projects. So maybe you're going to convert a basement. If I switch this, you'll see the cost plummet. It's way cheaper to do an in-house conversion versus a new structure, just because of the nature of the construction. Another thing that's kind of cool is you go through these tabs, you can choose things like the quality of construction you're going to do, so appliances and finishes. You can choose whether you're going to have the various systems connected or not. So for instance, if it's an in-house and you can use the furnace to heat that space as well, there's a lot of savings. If you're going to use the existing electrical system or plumbing or various pieces there that can have some real impacts on cost, regardless of which project you're doing, type of project. The other piece they do is make it really easy to understand. I'm going to turn this off because it's kind of different. How loan impacts would impact your project. So it's really useful there. And then the last piece here is they offer you kind of a rent calculator. The rent calculator is most interesting for understanding the long-term projections. So understanding sort of how it may lose money initially, but over a longer period start to actually break even or be let you make a little bit extra. So this tool is really just useful for comparison. Exact numbers, I would say, you're going to have to adjust for our local market. So with that idea, I put together a simple template, pro forma template. On the website, there's a link to the official US government HUD pro forma. This thing's a bit of a beast. If you take a look here, it's got all kinds of details. Really great if you're doing a big project, but it's probably also a little overwhelming. So I tried to go ahead and build a simpler version. So if you go to the OPOP website, you'll find a link to this. It's just a Google spreadsheet. And essentially, you can go through this in the yellow boxes or where you can fill in, as it were. So you probably don't have acquisition costs because you're not buying a piece of property to build your ADU on. They're there, just skip them. When we talk about construction, we talk about soft costs versus hard costs. Soft costs are roughly what we do before we start actually digging the dirt and building things. So design, permits, things like that. With Olympia, Lacey Tumwater's free plans, you might be able to push that down quite a bit, those pre-costs. You probably still will have to pay a little bit to have a site plan developed if you do that yourself and other pieces. So I just want to be cautious about understanding that there are some costs before you start building. And then hard costs are what it actually costs to build. These numbers, they're very fuzzy, hence all the zeros as far as like the round numbers. But they give you a sense of what it might cost to build. These are based on projects I've done recently here in the local area. And so it gives you a really ballpark sense of maybe like a 600 to 800 square foot building with a bathroom and a kitchen, maybe one bedroom. And the things you'll notice on these pro formas, they always have a contingency. It's generally 5 to 10%. Most banks want to see that because construction goes over budget. So just make sure you have a built-in padding, and gives you a sense of what a project might cost. There's going to be the great construction and design talks later that'll do more into like what these actually look like. You can talk to those folks. The other next piece of pro forma is talking about the operating costs, what it's going to take to run the place, what you might collect in ongoing rent. The important number here is understanding the cash flow. So this unit might cash flow, made up numbers, this $12,680 a year. We can use that to understand how much debt this can support. So it's a really pretty simple calculation to go from, take the loan period, the interest rate you're getting, which you can play around with in the spreadsheet if you want to. And then you can understand, hey, this unit could support $196,000 loan. So what that lets us do is we go back to that first sheet, that number comes back in, and we can see, hey, I can support that much. I have some other savings I can apply. So my gap is this $35,000 I need to figure out. And you can close that gap by either cutting the construction costs, maybe simplifying what you're building or building it smaller, or finding somewhere else to borrow it from. Maybe it's that personal loan from a friend or family member. So yeah, so this is kind of how when my wife and I are looking to take on a project, how we kind of start understanding what the aspects of it are and if it makes sense to go ahead and do or not as a rental. So yeah, I think with that, I'm going to hand off to Barb and Lindsay to talk about the other side of the world. I can figure out how to stop sharing.
Let me step in for just a minute. Thank you.
Yeah.
I want to encourage people to ask questions. We've had one so far. Where do you find these wonderful resources? They're on the OPOP website, which is on your screen right now, opopnow.org. So we have a resource page that includes these pro formas, as well as the other documents that Luke referred to. So we encourage you to look there. And please start posting your questions on the Q&A tab. Thanks.
Well, hello, good morning. We want to thank the OPOP friends for having us this morning. And we know spring is in the air, right? So with it, folks are planning their outdoor projects. We'd like to share a little bit about the many financing options that are available for building ADUs. We know ADUs offer many affordable and accessible solutions and options. You can tailor these structures depending on size and price to meet your very own needs. And as Luke mentioned, they can be a guest house, a home office, a living area for even adult children or aging parents. And they can even become a rental income producing property for you if you desire. So OliFed has been in the construction industry or lending for 115 years. And our knowledgeable loan officers are a great tool and can be very experienced in guiding a successful project for you. Janae, if you would like to, thank you. Anyway, we see, so we've been around for 115 years construction. And Janae, next slide. We see these costs of the ADUs running anywhere from over 100,000 to well beyond 200,000. This is going to vary depending on the types of materials you use and the finishes you select, plus the size of the unit. They can range anywhere from 600 square feet on up in the county to almost half the size of your main structure. So OliFed has created 6 loan options, which can be customizable solutions depending on your situation. And our team can provide support in planning and financing your project. We've built relationships with the municipalities and with local builders, and can be a guide for you in planning as well as financing. So on the next slide, I'd like to hand it over to Lindsay, who's going to share many of these options with you.
Thanks, Barb. Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to get to share some of these loan options that are available for you when you're thinking about how you're going to finance these wonderful projects. One thing I also want to reiterate, and Janae mentioned it, and Barbara also alluded to it, is everybody's situation is different based on your project, based on your financial situation. And one of the things that OliFed and our experienced loan officers do really well is we take the time to get to know exactly what your needs are. We're going to ask you all of the questions about your project, what your goals are, and then we're going to make sure that we recommend the best product and loan option to meet your specific needs. So as we go through these various options, keep in mind, these are just really the general overview of these options. And if you want to reach out to one of our experienced loan officers, they are going to be able to make the recommendation that's best for you. We don't expect anyone to come in and know exactly what type of loan you need. But if you do have general questions about these loan options, feel free to use the Q&A feature, and we'll try to get back to you and answer those questions throughout this presentation. So the first couple types of loans that we're going to talk about are equity loans, and we have a couple different options for you. These particular 2 options are available for those that have the sufficient equity in your home right now. So we're not necessarily counting the future ADU in the value of your home. We're just looking at what your home is valued at right now and talking about any equity that you may have available. So the first one is a home equity line of credit. So it's a great option for you. It allows for flexible payments, no fees. If you have a first mortgage, you can keep your first mortgage as is. One of the great features about the home equity line of credit is it functions as an open line of credit. So you, let's say, get a loan for $100,000 and you have that $100,000 available to draw on as you need it. So as you're building your ADU, you can access the funds that you need at that time. During that time, your payments are interest only on the amount of the loan proceeds that you have used so far. So it keeps your payments very low. The second option is a home equity loan. So basically it's a fixed rate, fixed term loan. You get one lump sum. You can use those funds, put them in your savings or checking account and use them as you need them. The difference between the HELP loan and the HELOC is that with the HELP loan, your payments are fixed every month. You're paying principal and interest. So depending on if you like the option of knowing exactly how much your payment's going to be each month, we have both options available for you. On the next slide, these are very similar options, but we use them as more of a construction loan. So similar to the HELP loan that we just talked about, it functions the same way. However, it allows you to include the future value of the ADU in your overall value of your home. So if you don't necessarily have sufficient equity as is, but we know the ADU is going to add some value to your home after it's complete, you can use the HELP construction loan and get future value. So essentially what we do is you have all of the bids, plans, and specs for the ADU that you're going to be building. We give all that information to the appraiser up front, and the appraiser will include the future value of the ADU in your overall appraised value. So it allows you to borrow more up front, knowing that your home is going to be worth more once your project is complete. The other option that you see on this slide is what we call the Help Retrofit Loan. So this is a great product if you plan on building a energy efficient ADU or adding energy efficiency features to your current home or to the ADU. This is a loan option that gives you a discount on the rate and allows you to build in those energy efficiencies in your ADU as well. So again, these programs are very similar to the first ones we talked about, but it allows you to have future value and utilize future equity in your home right up front. On the next slide, so those first few options were, again, second mortgages. So those would be utilized if you have a first mortgage and you want to keep your first mortgage as is, but also want to utilize some of the equity in the home and have a second mortgage. The next options we're going to talk about are for a, oh, excuse me, Janae, if you could go back one, thank you. This would be, for example, if you have a first mortgage, but you also have additional equity and you want to maybe refinance your whole first mortgage and take out additional cash. This is a great opportunity right now to capitalize on the lower mortgage rates. So if you haven't refinanced and you're maybe have a first mortgage that has a higher rate than what you could be getting right now, you have the opportunity to refinance your first mortgage and also pull out additional equity all at the same time. So then you can use that additional equity to build your ADU, and it would give you one mortgage. So rather than having the first and the second mortgage, you would have access to the equity and also maybe potentially lower your overall interest rate and still be able to pull out cash. And then you can use that additional funds to finance the ADU. And then on the next slide, so this is very similar to a refinance, but it's a refinance construction loan. So again, this is an option that we can utilize to give you future value of the ADU project. So if you're going to maybe still refinance your first mortgage, but want to access potentially more equity in your future home when you have the ADU built, you can do that as well. As I mentioned with one of the equity loans, you can do that with a refinance as well. So again, we would have you provide all of the bids, plans, and specs for the ADU that you're going to build. We give those to the appraiser and they would include that ADU in the future value. It increases your overall value and allows you to access more funds up front to finance your projects. So again, these are all options that are available. Everybody's situation is different. So I encourage you to think about what your goals are and what you want to achieve with the ADU, and then reach out to one of our experienced loan officers. They're going to be able to talk to you in more detail about all of the options that are available to you. They'll take a look at what your goals are, what your objectives are with the ADU, and they'll be able to give you the best options for your specific needs. One of the other things I do want to mention, as Luke had mentioned in his presentation, is ideally we've talked about these loan options that are available to you for your current primary residence. However, OliFed also is able to take a look at if you have an investment property and you're interested in adding an ADU to that investment property, we also have loan options that would be available to finance an ADU unit on your investment property as well. So again, reaching out to one of our experienced loan officers, they're going to be able to discuss all of the options for you and then make recommendations for what program would best meet your needs. We do have some additional information you can see there on the slide on how to contact us. We have a lot of information on our website about these different loan programs, so you can visit olifed.com and check out all of those options. There's also a link on there to connect you with one of our loan officers, so I encourage you to reach out and have some of your questions answered. So thank you for the opportunity to share what OliFed has to offer.
Thank you. The questions are rolling in. It looks like we've got perhaps 4 financing related questions and one that's more suited toward Luke. So let's start with the question for Luke. You laid out that, that calculator for San Mateo County. Can you estimate what the cost per square foot for residential construction is in Thurston County?
So I can, but I want to be super cautious about using that number. So there's 2 different issues. One is that number has moved up a lot recently, and we don't know if it's going to stay where it is or move around. So usually I'm seeing folks use anywhere from $200 to $250 per square foot. I want to be super careful though. An ADU, that number is designed for like a single family home that is 1,000 to 2,000 square feet. And so that cost spreads out over a whole house. The problem is an ADU is a tiny house, or sorry, it's not a tiny house, it's a small house. So it has a kitchen and it has a bathroom and all the costs of like heating and cooling, if you have cooling, and hot water heating that generally we would see in, that would be spread out over thousands of square feet are going to be shoved into a 600 square foot building. So there's sort of a floor with an ADU of like, you're going to spend, I wish I could tell you the number. I haven't done enough ADUs to tell you what that floor is, but there is sort of this funny thing of like just saying, oh, I'm going to build 500 square feet and it's $200 a square foot, so it's going to be $100,000. Probably won't work, unfortunately. There's just sort of a floor that all those services are going to cost you. I wish I had really good numbers on that. I'm hopeful that as we see more ADUs built, we can get some more information about like what those general trends look like. I would say, I think Barbara spoke to like the $100,000 to $200,000. I will be honest, I have not seen anybody build a detached ADU in the greater Thurston County area for less than $180,000 in the last 2 years. It's just, once you get into site costs and other things like that, you're kind of up in that range. It might be possible to do less depending on what's happening on your site, or really easy access, or maybe utilities are super easy. But I think the floor is unfortunately somewhere in that. There's just a floor. The thing to know is that the incremental cost of adding another 100 square feet, if that's really like key to you, can be pretty inexpensive, relatively speaking. So one more bedroom might not cost incrementally that much more. And that said, like, I still really encourage folks to build as small as you think you can, because the impacts on like having a second building on the lot, it's nice to keep them small and compact for lifestyle. But yeah, so the quick answer is 200, 250 a square foot, but doesn't perfectly apply to ADU today.
Great, thank you, Luke. And then it seems like the rest of our questions are all for Oli Fad. Let's see here, where should we begin? Let's start at the top. We have a question about financing. Can a family member get financing for an ADU on the owner's land? Or does the owner need to provide the financing?
That's a great question, actually, and one that I think we've gotten in the past. Technically, the person who's obtaining the financing really does have to be on title of the property. There has to be an ownership relationship there on the property. There are different ways we could take a look at potentially having multiple borrowers on a loan. So that would be a great question to discuss in more detail with one of our loan officers.
Great, thanks. Let's see here. How long is an appraisal typically valid for? So if you get an appraisal, is it good for a year? Is it good for 6 months? How long is it valid?
On average, we typically look at appraisals being good for about 6 months. When we do appraisals for any of our loans, really, including the type that I mentioned where we are considering the ADU as future value, we're really going to use that appraised value upfront when we fund the loan. So if you go through the loan process, we're going to use the future value, including the ADU, in that appraisal. We're going to be looking at that appraised value right now in determining how much you would be able to borrow based on that appraised value. Mm-hmm. But if you're looking at the appraisal, wondering, when all of this is done, is this really still going to be the value of my home? Technically, we look at about 6 months being valid. It really just depends on what the market is doing, how quickly home values are increasing or decreasing, but typically we look at about 6 months.
Great. This is an interesting question. Are these common options at all lending institutions, or are they unique to OLIFED? So would you take a minute to explain what is unique about OLIFED and why you're able to offer the kinds of loans that you offer?
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great question. What makes OLIFED unique is that, as Barbara mentioned, we've been in the lending industry for 115 years here in Thurston and Mason County, and now we're lending in the surrounding counties. But one of the great benefits about getting a loan with OLIFED is we are a portfolio lender, which means we hold all of our own loans, we service all of our own loans. When you get a loan with OLIFED and you have any questions or need anything in the future, you know you're talking with the same people. We don't sell the loans on the secondary market. And it allows us to look at the big picture, and it allows us to make lending decisions that really make sense for our community. All of our lending decisions, our underwriting decisions are all made in-house. We work with our whole lending team on a regular basis. And so it allows us to really look at individual situations and make loans that make sense. These particular loans, although you could probably, you're going to be able to get a home equity line of credit or potentially a second mortgage or even refinance and take cash out at most lenders. One of the great things also about working with OLIFED, when you go the construction route, where you want to use that future value of your project to be able to access more equity, that's really what we specialize in. And we've been doing that for so many years. Again, we have the ability to look at that future value. There's a lot of other lenders that don't necessarily have that particular program or that particular feature available. So that is definitely one thing that OLIFED can provide. The other thing is we've built so many relationships with a lot of the local builders. They know our program, they know how it works. They prefer to do business with us when they're building for their clients because we work together with the builder, with the client. Everybody is up to date on what's going on, and we make it a very easy and streamlined process.
Thank you. And I just want to emphasize for you policy nerds out there that one of the things that banks encounter when they do sell their mortgages on the secondary market is they're subject to a whole set of federal rules and regulations that institutions like OLIFED are not. So it leaves you more room for creativity in terms of what you can finance and whom you can finance. Great.
Yes.
Okay, now the building questions are rolling in here. Kit home. Where do you stand on kit homes? The question is, what about these kit homes? You can order from Amazon or Home Depot or IKEA. I guess that's both a building and a lending question. Who wants to go first?
I'll go ahead and just jump out there with that from a financing standpoint, because we do get that question a lot as well. A couple things to consider is, and again, we could go into a lot more detail if you reach out to a loan officer directly. But one of the challenges is depending on what type of loan program you need. If you're looking at needing to utilize the future value, one thing I do want to mention is anytime we use future value on any type of construction project, Olympia Federal is going to hold those funds needed for the project, and we're going to disperse those funds as your home is being built. So one of the challenges that can come up if you're looking at purchasing a kit, you may need those funds upfront to purchase that kit, and we may not necessarily release those funds until the home is affixed to the property. So depending on the type of financing option, that can be a challenge. One of the other things to consider is that's going to be a factor in the appraisal, and you may not get as much of an appraised value out of a kit home versus more of like a stick-built structured home. So there's a couple things to consider there, but again, everybody's situation is different. And so talking with a loan officer on the financing part would be a great way to start.
Anything to add to that, Luke?
So for the construction side, I think Lindsay summarized it really well of just like the concerns about value and stuff like that. The two issues I have with kit homes, probably, and the builders, a few weeks we talked about this too, is Washington's energy code just got a lot more stringent, let's say. And it's great. I think it's a really good move, but unfortunately those kits often won't meet local building standards. They may not meet it in general, like for engineering or specifically earthquake standards here would be things that we might have to look at. So often, unfortunately, those kits are not, they're built for a very general, like you could put it in the Midwest where there's no wind and no earthquakes, maybe. That's made up, but so it can be hard to get this to fit into code. That's why Olympia Lacey Howard did the pre-planned or the pre-designed plans, because they do meet all the requirements. So that could be a challenge. The other issue is that those kits, on the other hand, I really want those kits to work. I want to see modular, like advanced modular construction used for these. Some of this stuff's starting to happen in California. It's really exciting because they're doing things where they can crane an entire ADU onto site, and it was built near close enough that local inspectors saw it under construction and signed off on it. But it gets sort of the economies of scale that you should be able to get out of modular construction that we're all hoping to see. And to be clear, modular is different than manufactured, which we think of like the manufactured homes. These are stick built, like very, very well built homes that just happen to be built in a factory. And so hopefully we'll see evolution towards that. We haven't yet, but everybody's sort of hoping we're going to see that in the future. So yeah, I don't think they're bad. There's not a lot out there to say much yet.
They need to evolve a little bit, is what you're saying. Good.
But if you want to find out for us, let us know how it goes.
Be the guinea pig. So back to lending again. Interest rates. How do they compare across the different financing options that you laid out? How much does it vary based on credit score? And what's the variation between the options? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. So another great thing about Olympia Federal is we offer the same interest rates to all of our borrowers. So although, most lenders will look at what we call risk-based pricing, where they're going to give you an interest rate based on your credit score, your financial situation. Olympia Federal doesn't. We do look at the whole picture. And so if you go to our website, theolyfed.com, all of our interest rates are listed there, and you can take a look at the various programs that we talked about and take a look at what those interest rates are. For those HELP loans, the home equity loan program, those you have a couple different terms to choose from. Same with a refinance, there's some different terms to choose from. So depending on the term that you're interested in, you're going to have different interest rates. I will say our interest rates are very competitive for what you may find out there for other lenders. But again, all of that information is on our website. So I encourage everyone to take a look at that, and then you'd be able to kind of compare and see what your options are.
Thank you, Lindsay. We have a couple of questions here that I think should maybe be directed to city staff. I'm just going to put them out here. And if one of our panelists has an answer, that's great. One is, if you were to split your property into 2 parcels and sell the other parcel to your family member or whoever, then they could build and finance what they built, right? As long as there's access of some kind. Technical question for city staff.
I think the key there is, because I can answer this one really quick, it's not an ADU if it's on a separate lot. It's a primary home again. So you could totally do that. You could totally go build it. I'm sure you could get financing for it if it's a legal lot and all those things. But the big key is if it's on its own lot, it becomes a primary home. And the big kicker there is that the permits and fees become much more expensive, generally speaking. So like the great thing about ADUs for like a family member would be that there's a significant saving in impact fees, because rather than paying an Olympia ballpark 38,000, I believe, for impact fees for a new single family, I think, don't quote me on the second number, I believe impact fees on an ADU are 3,000 or 4,000. So massively less expensive when you're building a small unit. But if it's on a separate lot, it's a single family home again. You build 2, so you can build a house and a single ADU over there. But ADUs always the second thing built, not the first one. So.
Right. The key word here being accessory. So it's accessory to the primary residence. Good. Thanks, Luke. Question for Olifed again. Have you seen an uptick in requests for ADU funding? Not just public interest, but actual loans executed and ADUs built. What are you seeing out there?
Yeah, we've been seeing a lot of requests. I've been receiving a lot of requests from builders and clients, realtors, people looking to and interested in building an ADU. In fact, one of the builders we work with just completed the very first project on the special Lacey process that they created a year ago, and we had a workshop with them last year, and that was just completed, and they're starting to build that first one, and they said the process went very smooth because of how they advanced and pre-approved the plans. And then we have realtors calling about clients that are looking to put ADUs on their sites too when purchasing. Builders are calling about clients asking them to build ADUs. So people are really taking a look at it. It's picking up.
That is so exciting. Thank you, Barb. We have a question about lumber costs. Luke mentioned building costs. This questioner has heard that the price of lumber has skyrocketed in the last few years. Do you see material costs going down anytime soon? Might be hard to answer, but just throwing it out there.
So yes, they are up. I can definitely tell you that. So the quick answer is like, this is like a geopolitical, like, who knows? Couple things are happening right now. Construction costs have gone up basically because we are demand pressured and supply constrained. Supply is partially because of some of the previous administration's choices about tariffs on imported lumber. Those seem to be going away, so there's hope that we might see some sort of reduction in pressure there in the next period of time. I don't know. There's also shipping problems. We got, like if you tried to buy a fridge in the last 6 months, it's a lost cause because the ships literally can't move them over here. So that should also get better later this year, seems to be the rumor. The other thing we see is just like everything is weird. 2020 was a weird year. We all know that. People bought weird stuff. So people did a lot of like home renovation suddenly in numbers that have never been seen before. So the whole market's constrained. I think my bad answer is like, from what I've seen, I think we're at a new normal. I think it's going to stop skyrocketing, but I don't think I don't think we're going to see it come back down. I think we jumped. I'm hoping we're done jumping. I pray. It's possible we're not, but I don't think we're going to see a reduction. That said, I don't think you're going to like suffer for not jumping in right today, if I had to guess. Also, please don't quote me on any of this, even though this is being recorded. But yeah, the hard thing is like everybody else here, I listen to like economics podcasts. They're like, it's up for these reasons. So yeah, I think it's complicated. It'll get a little better, but I don't think you're going to see it come down. I think it's just going to hopefully moderate.
The short answer being, don't wait until lumber prices come down to start your ADU program.
Probably not, sadly.
Good, thanks, Luke. Let's see, we have 2 more questions here. Can you speak to what one could expect with property tax increases, and potential future property evaluation after building an ADU? I don't know that we've got property tax experts on this panel, but can you tackle one or both of those questions? Anybody?
It'll be more. So I have a couple of properties. I have one property that has like 2 units on it, and one is basically an ADU, and they look at it that way. It was a grandfather, as they call it. So basically, before we purchased it, it had like 2 units. One wasn't totally legal. We brought it into compliance. And because of the way the appraisal system today works, it's primarily based on square footage. And because ADUs don't pop it into duplex, it doesn't get reclassified as like a double income property. And so they're not as bad as they might be. They don't go up as much as you might think. It could be bad depending on which side of the equation you're on. So just to be super clear. So the quick answer is they go up sort of on a square footage basis. I will say colloquially, I've seen them, I think I put in the spreadsheet, like you're probably looking like $1,000 in extra property taxes a year if you have like a 1 bedroom. Is a very ballparky number. It could be twice that, it could be two, and it's a hard thing of like, I don't understand property tax evaluation. It is a dark magic that is hidden to me. Maybe the only Fed folks know better, but I think it's partially like, it's hard to know. It will go up, I can tell you that. It will not double. So somewhere between, it's somewhere more than zero, less than two times.
Anything to add to that, Barb? And maybe something that occurred to me, does having an ADU on your property ultimately contribute a lot to the property valuation?
Well, it does add value to the property. We're not seeing dollar for dollar value, and that's mainly because we don't have comparable sales, as Luke mentioned in the beginning. And so as we have more sales of properties with ADUs, they'll be better able to evaluate that second unit. And so right now we're not seeing dollar for dollar. You may spend $250,000 and get half that value or less on your property. It's really varying depending if they have a comp or not. Yeah, so as far as taxes, levy rates vary from cities to county. So depending on whatever value they're looking at giving that second unit, that tax, your levy, your particular levy rate, 1.2, 1.3, whatever it is, will be added and increase your taxes that much.
Thank you. Well, we have just a few minutes left and 3 questions. I'm going to answer one just out loud here. Are there any local construction companies that specialize in building ADUs? On our resource page on the OPOP Now website, there is a link to the Oli Master Builders website. I would suggest looking there, but Luke, can you we also have a construction panel coming up in April. So please sign up for that. You can get some insight into how that's done and who's doing it. And then we have a couple of questions concerning financial incentives for other than lower impact fees to spur construction of ADUs. Janae, I'm going to put that one to you. Is there anything on the horizon that you know about in terms of making the ADUs more affordable from a property tax or impact fee point of view?
I only am following Olympia. So that's a caveat here, but one of the things coming up, and I hope I'm not out of date on this information, but the city is looking at the sprinkler requirements, which I think some of you who have followed the OPOP Facebook page or whatnot may have seen, but city council is looking at changing the sprinkler requirements for ADUs, which right now require sprinklers, and the cost to sometimes to bring enough water pressure to your ADU can really add thousands of dollars in cost. The Olympian actually covered that. If it's something you're interested in finding out more about, take a look at that. I guess I've seen Olympia through the missing middle conversations and then the housing conversations, just be trying to figure out what are obstacles and how to roll those back. But it's a slow process. So I think it's probably worth talking to city staff about, again, depending on which jurisdiction, of course, you're living in, to talk to city staff about it, because I think the city's aware of it. They know there are obstacles to building. Policymakers are encouraging city staff to try to look at how to roll some of these things back actively, but it still takes time with these public processes. Their conversations always take time. So Mary, I can't remember now, but you had a couple of particular things you were asking about, whether those were options, and I don't remember what they were, but the answer is no, I don't think those, now I can't remember what the questions were, but I remember thinking the answer was like, no, I haven't seen that there's a conversation around that issue. So anyway, it's, again, I think those are questions for city staff. If you're trying to calculate like what's the time to build, you're really going to make a lot of complex calculations, because interest rates potentially are going to be going up, right? So it's like you may wait to save on lumber, or you may wait because you want the city to roll back more of the costs, but then interest rates are going to go up. So you're going to end up paying more time over, over the long run anyway. So it's just one of those things where you have to decide, is this the time for me to do this? And kind of go for it at some point. So I'm, in the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen one more time. And in particular, to remind everybody about the website where you can find more information. There is a page dedicated to ADU 101 is what the page is called, on the OPOP website. And that is going to be a place where you can find links to all of the things that were mentioned today by our panelists. OliFed has put together a succinct website that shows all of those lending options that they talked about today are described on a specific page. There's a link to that specific page on our website. There's a link to the different calculators that Luke shared as well. So thank you so much, all of you who are attending today. Thank you for the fantastic questions. And thank you so much to our panelists for sharing their expertise. Every time OPOP hosts an event, I just feel so heartened by the generosity of this community and the expertise that folks have and are willing to share and are excited to share. So we hope to see some of you register for upcoming workshops. Hope to see all of you register really for our upcoming workshops on designing and constructing your ADU. And then keep an eye out again on the OPOP website. We're going to post the video for this within a week. So take a look at the video, share it with friends who maybe missed this event. And again, thank you for sharing your Saturday, spending your Saturday with us, and have a really fantastic afternoon in the sun. Oh, I see a question about sprinklers. Those rascals, thousands of dollars. Check out that Olympian article. That will tell you the cost of the sprinklers, Todd. So, all right, take care everybody.